Hi. This is something a bit different for the channel. There's two reasons behind this. One is that this has been a very eventful week. Things that weren't expected have happened, which have taken up a lot of time, so I haven't written the script I normally would for this week's video. The other is a conversation on Twitter the other day. A Twitter friend of mine asked, is the person that we see here on social media really the person that you are in real life? Do you put on a mask? Are you using a persona on social media that's not reflective of who you really are? My answer was, I'm a WYSIWYG kind of guy, a what you see is what you get kind of person. I think that what I see projected on social media is reflective of who I really am. Now, it made me think that most of the videos I see from other autistic people on YouTube are very off the cuff. Everything that I do is very prepared and very scripted. So I thought now was as good a time as any to do something just as me. So I'm all prepared. I've got my cup of Earl Grey and my tablet ready if I need to check any facts. So let's get on with it. So what was it that happened earlier on this week that took up so much of my time? My wife, Mrs. Autistamatic, Mrs. A as I refer to her on social media, is chronically asthmatic. She's also got ME, fibromyalgia, and a diagnosis of hypermobile EDS or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. She's not autistic herself, but EDS is something that a lot of autistic people have. Earlier on this week, she started experiencing a real tightness of breath and pain around her back and chest, which caused us concern. But her peak flow readings, the readings you take of how strong your breath is, didn't suggest that there was anything wrong. It ended up on Friday night with her in hospital, being investigated for some potentially quite nasty problems, and she stayed overnight. And that's something I really hate myself. Obviously she hated it, and the cat hated it as well. She's okay, thankfully. She was back the following day. She was tested for all manner of things, and all those tests came back negative. We've both had COVID tests just in case, and they're both negative. Just to put this in perspective, this is the middle of October 2020 as I record this, and at the moment we're seeing what some people are calling the start of the second wave of COVID-19. Infections are rising really fast, and new restrictions are being placed in places all over the UK. Don't know what's going to be happening where we are, but signs are that we'll have something extra to deal with soon. When the doctor at the hospital gave his verdict, he suggested one of two things. Either it was a viral infection they couldn't detect in her upper respiratory tract, or perhaps it was something to do with her ME. Just one of those things, they said. Now, when we quizzed them about that, they said, well, there's a lot we don't know about ME. Now, that is something which hits home personally. Why don't we know so much about ME? It's because there's not a great deal spent on research into ME. Yet, ME is a condition which affects hundreds of thousands of people in the UK alone, millions worldwide, and has a massive effect on quality of life. My wife is quite typical in that she can't work anymore. She's tried really, really hard, but she has so many instances where she's in too much pain or the fatigue's too great for her to be able to actually do her job. She's had to give up. Now, I know a lot of other people with chronic illnesses on social media, some of them who are also autistic, and it's a familiar tale. Some manage to soldier on through, but a lot don't. Then I look at all the research that's being done into autism that nobody wants. Now, what do I mean when I say nobody wants? There's a great deal of research been done, lots of surveys that have asked autistic people, and in many cases non-autistic people close to them, what they want. There was, in particular, a huge survey done a couple of years ago by the Facebook group and the blog Autistic Not Weird. I think a guy called Chris Bonello does the work, runs it. They did this massive survey, 11 or 12,000 people responded, autistic and non-autistic. A lot of them were people who had autistic people in their lives as well, and asked a whole load of questions. I'll put a link down below in the description, or wherever the description is on the app that you're using, so that you can go and have a look at it yourself. It's a great piece of work, really well put together. I'd recommend anybody have a look at it. There are some surprising things in there. That when asked if there were a cure for autism, would you take it? that the overwhelming majority of autistic people said, no, I wouldn't. So why is there so much research being done into the causes of autism? Why is there so much research being done into what can be done about autism? Autism is measured externally by behaviours. What we feel as autistic people inside, though, is differences in thought, in the way we process information, in the way we receive information about the world around us, in differences in senses. And as a result, we express ourselves differently. The video I did a few weeks ago about, it was called Mind Reading, if I remember rightly, about theory of mind, talked about how autistic people and non-autistic people have a different way of looking at the world, how our theory of mind is based to a great degree about what we would do ourselves in a given situation. And if two people process information differently, they're not going to do the same or think that of other people unless they have learned that other people are different from them. An awful lot of what we see in autism research is looking at why animals, in many cases that have been modified to behave in a way which is deemed as being autistic, what changes in genes make them behave that way? What do they have to do to them? How do they behave afterwards? Is there anything that can be done to train them to behave differently? Autistic people may behave differently, but that's not who we are. We don't want to be trained to behave in a different way. We also don't want anything that takes away the way we see the world. As an autistic adult, somebody who's lived being this way for 50 years, I can't imagine what it's like to be any different. No matter how much I read about, no matter how much I observe, no matter how many conversations I have with people who are not autistic, I don't know what it's like to not be autistic. But I do know I don't want to be anything different. So when I see that there's money from taxes, money that's donated to charities being spent on research into why autism happens and whether or not it can be stopped, or ways in which autistic people can be trained to behave differently, that really, really hurts. It makes me angry. But then when I look at something that really is making a difference to people's lives, that really, really hurts them, like my wife's ME or the EDS or the fibromyalgia, and that's not having as much research, by God, the anger just boils over. Why is she left to rot? If I give money to a charity, I want to know it's going to benefit the cause that charity is dedicated to, whether it be a welfare cause, a political cause, or in this case, one that's talking about differences in people's lives or a health condition. And yet people are giving money to some autism charities that say they're researching the causes, but what they're actually doing is looking for a cure for something that nobody actually wants. There's a lot of money being made out of autism by convincing people that it's a bad thing. Now, let's be straight, living as an autistic person isn't as easy as you might think. I did a video only a couple of weeks ago about what's so hard about being autistic, because life can be very hard as an autistic person. But it's not being autistic that makes it that way. It's the way the world works. It's the attitudes towards us. The very fact that there are people who are not autistic, who want a cure for what we are, is indicative of the way the world thinks about who we are. Only a few years ago, I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago, there was a lot of controversy about the money being spent on male pattern baldness compared to the money being spent on malaria. You know, you've got something which is just about male vanity. Nobody died from being bald. Nobody's life was destroyed by being bald. It's just about vanity. It's about a feeling of virility. A lot of guys think if they go bald, then I'm not manly enough. Frankly, I don't care as much about guys going bald as I care about a killer disease. You know, we've all heard that riddle. What's the deadliest animal in the world? It's the mosquito, because through spreading malaria, it's killed more than any other animal. The same applies to situations like I'm talking about here. I don't want money being spent on a cure for something that nobody really wants a cure for when there are other conditions that desperately need the money. So what do I want you to take away from this? What's the message here? If you give money to an autism charity, do you know what that money is being spent on? Is it being spent on helping autistic people lead better lives? Is it being spent on outreach to businesses and educators and people in general to teach them what autistic life is really about, that the differences in us aren't as scary as the media try to portray? Do they try and counter ideas that autistic people are criminal or violent, or that we lack emotions, or that we have no empathy, all these other horrible things you hear? Is that what the money's being spent on? Is that money being spent on helping autistic people and their families who have co-occurring conditions like severe epilepsy, or intellectual disabilities, or learning disabilities that might in some way make their lives more difficult on top of being autistic? Then great. Throw all the money you want at them. Do all the sponsored events you want. You have my support and my blessing. If that money is being spent, even in part, on researching the causes of autism, essentially trying to find a cure, whether to prevent us from existing, or a tablet or a therapy that might change our behaviour so we don't look quite so autistic to other people, don't do it. Don't give them your money, please. You're not helping us. All you're doing is helping some scientists have a purpose. You're helping drug companies come up with a treatment that people don't actually want. There are people who are autistic who need a lot of care. In most cases, that's because they have co-occurring conditions, or comorbids they're sometimes called. People with intellectual disabilities, with certain kinds of learning disability, with uncontrollable epilepsy and other kinds of health conditions. All those people need help. And if the charities are helping them, that's valid. That's what they're there for. There are others of us who don't need that kind of help, but we still need those charities to be doing things which help to improve public understanding of autism, and liaising with governments and educational authorities to make sure that all kinds of autistic people get the opportunities that we deserve, that we're not held back in ways that we shouldn't be. What we don't want is that whole cause-cure kind of idea. I'm not telling you what charities you can and can't contribute to. That's up to you. What I do ask is that if you are going to contribute to them, look at what they do. See if it's ethical. See if it's what autistic people actually want. If it is, go for it. If it's not, please don't do it. Right. I think we'll leave it at that. I don't know how this is going to come out in the edit, but hopefully it'll be something watchable. In the meantime, if you'd like to subscribe to the channel for more videos on autistic life, then click up here on the logo on the left. Or if you click here on the right, then you can see more videos from the channel. Or you could visit Autistamatic.com. Thank you for watching.